Well, I think that I will start because, well, I don't know. We'll see if somebody is or not, but I really would like to present today we have a pleasure towards Brussels, environmental justice for new human species. And today, like panelists, we had Austen and Stijn Demeulenaere, and our moderator, this is Peter Fries. We are hosted today, thank you very much, in Gluon. So this is the organization in Brussels, Art, Research, Education platform. And today, this is a talk that is streaming, so just who is following us on the internet, so welcome too. I would like to tell you a few words about our moderator, Peter Fries. He is Brussels-based independent artist and senior researcher, PhD in self-organizing social system and space technology engineering, exploration of AI, mixed reality and humanities with emphasis on research, creation and critical art making. Peter, I think that I will give you the floor, so just you will continue.
Thank you, Alexandra, that's very kind. So, good evening to everybody. As Alexandra said, my name is Peter Fries. I have the pleasure today to moderate the laser talks. I do it once a year, and it's always nice to have very interesting topics, also topics which go beyond my daily experience and art practice. Today we have Kat and Stijn. I will introduce them in a second, but we also have, of course, some startup, so some introduction and the topic, environmental justice for non-human species. So in recent years, the discourse around environmental justice has grown to encompass the vast field of non-human species with whom humans communicate and share planet Earth. These species, from the smallest microorganisms to the largest mammals, play vital roles in maintaining ecological balance and biodiversity. This expansion signifies an important shift in our human understanding of justice. We recognize that the well-being of our planet and even the survival of humans is inherently tied to the health of all its inhabitants. Like contemporary philosopher Timothy Morton puts the shift in perspective by stating, we are not living in a world of separable things, but in a mesh of interconnection. So Timothy Morton is known that he was basically coining the object-oriented ontology philosophy and thinking. This paradigm shift encourages us to see the interconnectedness of all life on Earth and of life we cannot see or perceive, and to make an effort for a more harmonious coexistence with the natural world. It is through such efforts and narratives that we hope to address the current environmental disaster and restless proliferation of the human species on Earth. I think we are now almost 8 billion people. And maybe to rediscover what humans have lost on their way into what today is called modernity or the Anthropocene. So this laser talk, Environmental Justice for Non-Human Species, invites two artists and the audience to explore the interconnection between species, environmental advocacy, and storytelling linked to non-human entities. Kat Austen is going to start, focuses on insects as bioindicators of environmental health, specifically examine how dragonflies reflect changing ecosystems due to various forms of pollution. By using dragonflies and other insects as indicators, Austen highlights how climate change and pollutants disrupt the distributions, signaling broader ecological imbalances. Stijn Demeulenaere shifts our attention to sound pollution in the ocean, particularly in the North Sea, which is just around the corner. In this underwater world, where visibility is limited to a few meters, sound becomes the primary medium for communication and navigation among marine life. Demeulenaere's work reveals the profound effects of human-induced noise on this other sonic world. So this talk also wishes to inspire our collective efforts towards recognizing and protecting the rights of all species, and that our practices reflect better what we speak about. So before I introduce our first speaker, Austen, I just wanted to say that like last time, it was very nice that the audience could already during the presentation voice a question or have a remark, and also the two artists could compliment. So it's not that you are here and there, so we can also keep it very, very informative. That's the idea of the laser talk. So, so the first speaker is Austen, who normally lives those days in South Korea, but she's on residence here at the Chapelle Reine Elisabeth in Waterloo, and she made it the train Belgian transport to Brussels. So Austen is a person. As artist, she focuses on environmental issues, creating sculptural and new media installations, performances, and participatory works canted around sound. Her practice, based in Seoul and Berlin, is driven by research and aims to foster social and environmental justice. Austen explores themes like empathy with non-humans, climate crisis, and post-Anthropocene landscapes. She holds a PhD in chemistry from UCL and is a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts. Her work has been exhibited globally, including the V&A Museum in London and the Beaux-Arts and Religions in Brussels, and she has performed at venues like Opera Nord and Ars Electronica. Her new performance, Empty Fields, premieres at the Korea International Art Fair in September 2024, which is this year's. So, Kat, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. And thank you, Alexandra, for inviting me to the talk. Hello to everybody that we can't see in the room, as well as everybody here. Yes, it's a real pleasure to be able to share some of my work in this realm. And I really appreciated your introduction, Peter, because my work really starts from embracing this interconnectedness, this idea of interconnectedness, and also trying to understand with more balance the different voices of the world. So, I mean, as we are all aware, there has been, for many years, a great deal of effect of human activities on the planet, and the reach of anthropogenic impacts is everywhere. When we consider things like microplastic pollution, which is now present in the deepest trench in the ocean and in the air above us on the top of Mount Everest, we have a new material demonstration of the interconnectedness of humans with the planet. And with my work, I try to explore how we relate to these ramifications and impacts. Also trying to see it from a more than human perspective, so the perspective of others within the ecosystems, other aspects of the planet, to try to create or interrogate value systems, let's say, in terms of how we understand these ramifications. And so, departing from that point, for the last 3 years or so, I worked a lot on the climate crisis, and for the last 3 years, I've been exploring ideas of coexistence and remediation, and trying to see if there are ways to embrace the current reality of human coexistence with other entities on the planet, and the traces of human coexistence, to see if we can sort of find new ways to move beyond our present state. And so with that in mind, the button's not working, okay, we could do it this way. I wanted to talk today about work that I realised last year called How to Touch a Dragonfly. And How to Touch a Dragonfly, as you can see here, is a large-scale dome structure, and it affords the visitor the perspective of a dragonfly. So it's modelled on the physiology of a dragonfly's eye. And when you go inside it, you are immersed in another way of perceiving. It's this large scale, it's a 4-metre high dome, which essentially is a screen and audio environment, which plays video. So the surface that you see on the inside, that's actually a video being played. It's not a projection, it's rather that you're seeing a lot of pixels, and I'll explain the details of how that works as we go on. But I'm first going to talk a bit more about the concept and why I chose to do it this way. But it's a really, it's an interesting experience to be inside of it. And as I say, the kind of drive was to flip this idea on its head so that we use other beings as bioindicators. So dragonflies are amazing. They date back to prehistoric times. In the Pleistocene, there were dragonflies that were this big, and they have 4 wings, which they can move independently of each other. They can fly backwards and they can hover. They see at roughly the equivalent of 300 frames per second. So they live in an entirely different time. They're amazing. And they're really beautiful. And they eat mosquitoes. So, I mean, what's not to love? But they are so highly tuned as a creature that they're also extremely, extremely sensitive. That allows them to be such incredible hunters within their ecosystem that they're accustomed to. But what it means is that when things change, so when the climate becomes warmer, or if there are pesticides around, or if there are other habitat changes, then the dragonflies are one of the first species to respond to that. And for this reason, dragonflies are used by ecologists as bioindicators of an ecosystem's health. And knowing that, and thinking about the climate crisis and how different climates are, let's say, migrating around the globe, I was interested to change the perspective. So rather than thinking what dragonflies indicate to us how humans have changed the landscape, I wanted to ask what's it like for a dragonfly to experience human activities changing the affordance and habitability of the landscape for us. So for us as dragonflies, that is. And so I wanted to give this dragonfly's eye view, essentially, also learning a bit about how dragonflies perceive. Dragonflies hear with their wings. It's very cool. So I wanted to see if I can create an experience that would allow some cross-species empathy, right, for these quite substantial changes that are being wrought by human activity. And I've explored empathy in previous works, right? So I use sound and sometimes haptics and sometimes smell to try and create these embodied experiences that really key into our emotions. And so this was a key part of how I was going to approach how to touch a dragonfly. And I wanted to kind of, to create this environment. And what I've done in the past, so what I wanted to do here was to do things that really act as a form of translation between the dragonfly's body and experience and the human body and experience, and our modes of possible body perception, let's say. And so here you can see the shape of the dragonfly's eyes. These kind of copper-coloured parts are the top of the eye, and the eye colour changes as you go sort of around. The dragonfly's eyes are basically all around their head like this. And the top of the eyes are tuned to perceiving blue light and UV light, and the lower parts have 5 compared to our 3 different types of colour receptors, so that they can differentiate sort of shadows in the above and things contrasted against the variable colours of the ground below, which makes them incredible hunters. And as I say, they can process very fast movements as well in terms of their sight. So this made it into these kind of understandings of the dragonfly perception made it into the design of the dome, partially. But before I talk more about the design of the dome, I wanted to talk about where I found the things that I wanted to show from the perspective of the dragonfly. And so, as I mentioned, I wanted to explore how human activities in landscapes could be shown to be affecting the livability, the habitability of landscapes to dragonflies. And I realised this project in South Korea, and through my research, I found this valley, which is a UN Food and Agricultural Organization protected, globally important agricultural heritage site, which keeps farming using methods that were developed 400 years ago. So here is one of the few places where there are not and have not been pesticides used, or herbicides or fertilizers even. But they're rice fields, and the rice fields are farmed using underwater channels, which are the flow of which are controlled by the farmer, which changes the temperature of the water that goes into the rice field. It's very labour-intensive form of farming, but it's a very interesting contrast to everywhere else in South Korea, or many other places in South Korea where the land has been under more influence. So I started to do field recordings to understand how the dragonflies are acting here and to contrast it to other places. So I wanted to listen for the sound of different dragonflies' wings. When I was in this area, so it's called Cheongsam Island. When I was in Cheongsam Island, I encountered 3 different dragonflies and could discern the different sounds of the dragonflies from recording them using these microphones. And there were such swarms, it was really amazing. So I also used a 360 camera, so I'm going to tell you some technical stuff too. I used the 360 camera to record the dragonflies. You can see one just there. And then this formed part of the video material that went into the dome in the end, along with the sounds of the dragonflies. While I was in Chongshan Island, I also carried out interviews with people who were farming inside the globally important agricultural heritage site. And it was a beautiful experience. There was sort of 40 of the elderly people who were farming still in the region. It's really significant there that they told me there hasn't been the sound of a baby crying on Chongshan Island for 30 years, because when their children grew up, they immediately left, because there's a large sort of migration into the cities in Korea in general, and particularly from these extremely rural places. So their kids, most of them went to Seoul, and then when they had children, they had them in Seoul, and the grandparents go to Seoul to see the kids, and nobody comes back to Chongshan Island. And so things are really changing there. And they told me that they were feeling it in the fields, because it used to be that the rice terraces would go all the way up to the top of the mountain, and as fewer and fewer people are there to farm it, the higher fields go into disuse, and the people farming lower down can feel how the water table is changed because the use of the land higher up is different. It's really interesting. They also, one of the things that I wanted to talk to them about was their memories of dragonflies. And because, as you may know, South Korea has gone through extremely rapid economic growth and industrialization. And they were telling me that that they've noticed also that the dragonflies are coming out at different times of year, that some dragonflies don't come anymore, that there are different species of dragonflies coming. Scientific reports show that there's a kind of a northwards movement of the dragonfly species, and you're getting tropical dragonfly species being found in this south part of the Korean peninsula now. What I was really looking for was a very rare species of dragonfly called the Nanophyre coreana, which was only identified in 2020 as being a species. And it's this big, centimetre long, bright red, and it was discovered to be a distinct species in 2020 by DNA sequencing, which is also super interesting because it had been thought for a long time that the Nanophyre coreana was the normal Nanophyre, which is found everywhere in Asia. When it was identified as its own species, particular to South Korea, or to the Korean peninsula, it went from being your standard species to being classified as endangered in Korea, and scientists in Korea are campaigning for it to be included as endangered on the IUCN Red List. So this is significant for what we're talking about today, because of course it's our human classification, right, that suddenly shifts the value of these insects' lives to being of more significance because we name it something different. They're the same dragonflies. Yes, I also recorded dragonflies, and in this case a damselfly, in regular farming land. That's what this picture shows. And they were inquisitive. And now I would like to show you, before I start talking about the technical sort of part of the installation, I'd like to show you the video, if I can.
위로는 눈도 오고 그랬었는데 여기는 눈이 청소도 눈이 별로 없어요. 그렇게 날이 따스워졌어요.
And that just gives you a little taster of what it's like inside the dome, and what the soundscape is like. As I mentioned, the dome itself is essentially a very low resolution screen. So there are 2,100 pixels here, which are made of LEDs shining through Korean traditional paper called hanji, which is made of mulberry bark and has amazing light diffusion properties. And this array of LEDs, so 2,100 LEDs, are video mapped using MapMapper to play the 360 video, which has been edited. And it's edited in two ways. So it's edited for colour reproduction within this particular environment, with the coming through the hanji paper, which changes how the colours appear. And it's also edited to represent more the visual affordances of the dragonfly. And the sound is spatialized inside the dome. Here you can see the installation is designed to be modular. Every single one of these six-pointed aluminium stars has unique dimensions, which allows it to form this dome. Most of them are six-pointed. In order to get a dome from hexagons, you need to introduce some pentagons, so five-sided elements in order to create this curvature. But as much as possible, it's hexagons. And the reason that it's hexagons is because dragonfly eyes have hexagonal lenses. So a dragonfly's vision is made up of thousands of hexagonal lenses forming this kind of half durian shape, in fact, around its face. And there's been quite a lot of study into how insects with lenticular compound eyes see, and the best guess is that they see in this sort of low resolution way, where you have one image that is broken up into hexagonal parts. That's what the science says at the moment. It was thought at one point that each lens would see multiple, so you'd see multiple images of the same thing, one per lens, but in this, they now think this is the case. And the design was such that I wanted it to be reparable so that we could fix it if something broke, so that we would decrease the kind of material impacts of the installation, and also so that it could be completely collapsed down for shipping. And this was partially from practical reasons, but actually it's also more that I wanted to shift the impact of it away from a carbon footprint and onto providing labour and employment. So to build this is quite a labour-intensive task, and that's by choice. That's a kind of ethical choice in the design of the installation. So every hexagon is also completely unique. They all have different dimensions. Everything's mapped in sections, which are all numbered, and we put everything together exactly. And here you can see, exactly an example of what the low resolution looks like. So we're actually looking at a flower here. And this was also something that I really wanted to push far into this low resolution idea, just as a kind of anti-reaction to these, let's say, supernormal aesthetics that we can have for the natural world, things that we now can do, but to explore whether by, let's say, reducing the resolution of what comes in through the eyes, we can key more into our appreciation of sound and vibration, and by so doing really foster this empathy that I was looking to create. To get this non-human perspective and to think about what was just and right for insects. Here's a dragonfly mid-flight. So that's pretty much everything. Just to say that some of the ideas that I was working on with How to Touch a Dragonfly have made their way into the new performance work that you mentioned, which is Empty Fields, which is coming out in September, which is going to be work bringing these ideas around biodiversity and land use, also introducing human perspectives and perspectives on digital and virtual worlds, kind of overlaying to create hybrid ecologies. And that's going to be a performance work that spins sound out into an exhibition space through movement.
Wonderful. Thank you. I think I feel totally immersed. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Before we go to Stijn, maybe is there any quick reaction or question that we could directly want? Yes, please.
Is your dome, are you going to put it up somewhere in the neighborhood of Belgium?
I hope so. I hope so.
Okay.
Yes. If anyone wants to program it somewhere, I'm very happy to bring it over. Yes. No plans at the moment. It's still in South Korea just now, but it's going to come back to Europe in the next couple of years. So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any further remark or question? Okay, then maybe I invite Stijn to continue, please. So Stijn is a sound artist and field recordist from Brussels. Actually, lives very close to Gluon, complicated. With degrees in sociology and cultural studies, he transitions to sound art in 2009. Stijn creates installations, soundscapes, performances, and designs sound for dance, theater, and thought. His work explores the relationship between identity, sound, and listening, using sound to understand social structures and personal history. As associated artist with Kunstenwerkplatz, his work has been featured at venues like Concertgebouw Brugge, São Paulo Biennale, and Reina Sofia. Stijn has been a finalist in awards such as the 2021 Sound of the Year Award and the 2016 European Sound Art Award. And I can add, I met Stijn years ago because we were both in a group traveling to northern Peva, so the Netherlands, because there is the first radio telescope. And another artist friend was doing moon bouncing, sending electromagnetic waves incorporating sound to the surface of the moon. They would be reflected and come back, and that takes 2 seconds, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's a second. In the second half.
Yeah, and you were recording the sound of the observatory and what was going around. So that
Have you listened?
yeah.
So I am Stijn Demeulenaere. As Peter, thank you for your beautiful introduction. Thank you very much for your very interesting talk. I'm a listener. I like listening, and I started out as a sociologist, and then I became a radio journalist, and 15 years of listening later, I'm here and now mostly a sound artist and a field recordist. And I do 2 things. My research trajectory is basically works on 2 themes. On the one hand, I'm very interested in how people give meaning to sound. I'm a sociologist after all. And I call this the phenomenology of listening. Because I believe that listening is also very personal. Not only does every species listen differently, we all have a different, how do you say this? We all have different bodies, different shapes, and different organs to listen to. Not only between species, but also us humans, we all listen differently. Your ear canal is as individual as your fingerprint. And your ear canal is built to amplify frequencies that you then hear. So you all hear differently. But we also have our own histories, our own identities, and we listen with them. And some sounds mean something to me in a way that don't to you. Something that intrigues me a lot. And the other thing, and this is where my installation CYLAND is about, I'm very interested in how the relationship between sound and spaces and how sound creates the place, the meaning of the place. I basically try to understand places by listening to them. In the end, I'm asking how sound helps us to find, literally, our place in the world. So very quickly about the meaning, this is another installation. This is called Soundtracks. It's an archive of memories of sound. I would invite everybody to send me a letter describing the sound you remember. All you need to do is remember the sound and write it down by hand and send me a letter. And that shows, when you read all these letters, it shows how individual, how singular our hearing is. And if it's for us, that case, it's definitely for other species. Then CYLAND linea lateralis in Latin, lateral line in English. CYLAND is an exploration of the underwater soundscape of the North Sea. This is the piece, this is how it looks. It's a multi-channel sound art piece. It's 6 speakers and 2 little subs, and it works on a lateral spatialization. All the speakers are on one line. And it has 9 seawater samples. So these are seawater samples. Yeah, you can see them better. Of the places I recorded. I recorded in many places, but geographically there were 9 main locations, and I got a seawater sample from each of them. So this is another view of the seawater samples. The people are really intrigued, and they really like coming up very, very close to the installation, and also taking the samples in their own hands and stuff like that. This is one of the samples. This, probably, since there's sand, there is this consumer. Yeah.
Should we pass it around?
Yeah, if you don't drop it. You can. So I have a small video of the trees. So I'll just let you So this is a small introduction to the installation. You can see the whole installation now. This was, of course, a stereo rendition of the sound. The whole composition is a lot longer, 15 minutes. And before I talk about how I made the composition, let's go back to the beginning of the piece. Mainly, I was asked in 2019 by Brugge, which is a very large concert hall here in Belgium, to make a piece about the sea, about the North Sea. And this was my image of the North Sea. It was a picture by Jan Locus, a friend of mine, of the beach, I think in Austen, where accidentally later the very first recording of the composition also came from. And it looks this otherworldly, totally not human place we don't know. And I very quickly thought, okay, they asked me to do something about the sea, and I listened to places in order to try to understand it. So this was my idea, to listen to the North Sea, to the underwater soundscape of the North Sea. Before I did that, I started reading some books. I started reading some books on history. Because basically, we have been sailing on the sea for at least 2,000 years on this North Sea. We know that because the Romans arrived in England on 12 years before the birth of Jesus Christ, 12 BC. We have used the sea very, very intensely. We have shaped the sea, built the whole of Holland, we moved sandbanks, and the sea has shaped us and has shaped our Western culture, because basically, up until the Industrial Revolution, the easiest way to transport stuff was over water. So this sea the geography of the sea decided where you would have harbor towns and where the trade routes would be. The trade routes were also information highways, which led to the exchange of ideas, of goods, of services, and of culture. So in a very real sense, we are the sea, but the sea is also us. We are part of the sea, and the sea is part of us. I also discovered some other things in my research, namely that the North Sea is the loudest sea in the world. And it is so because it's the busiest in the world. We use every cubic centimeter, every inch of the North Sea. We use it for shipping, for fishing, for the building of wind farms, for the oil and gas industry. We lay undersea cables, we have military exercises, and a bunch of stuff that I'm forgetting. The North Sea is very loud and actually also very humid. So it's one of those areas, like most of the natural areas in Western Europe, that is basically cultured land. We exist together with the flora and fauna of that species, of those places. Some part we have changed them a lot, domesticated even. Some parts are still quite wild, but even in those wild places, it's definitely human influence. So this was recorded at the Moonbeam. How do you say that in English? The beginning of the Scheldt at the seaside. Which is one of the busiest shipping routes in the world. Now, underwater, all this activity makes a lot of sound. And sound underwater propagates very easily and very, very far. Big story is, of course, a big example is that whales, some whale species can communicate up to 1,000 kilometers if there's no noise in between. However, especially for the North Sea, noise is also important, or sound is important because for marine life. Because in a sea like the North Sea is a shallow sea, it has a sandy bottom for the most part, and so visibility is low, usually measured in meters, sometimes in centimeters. So sound and smell become for animals, for sea life, very important. They use it for communication, but also for navigation, for orientation, to find food, to find mates, to hunt. They actually live in a very, very sonic world, much more than we do. Even so that for fishes, for example, this is the lateral line of the Atlantic cod. Now, a lateral line is, this is where I took the name from, is a sensory organ along the line of the sides of the fish. And it's used to feel variations in water pressure, and a lot of fish also use it to hear. And depending on which theory I read, some scientists think that our ears either evolved from lateral line, or from an organ that became just before the lateral line, or from gills. And so our ears have an aquatic, a sea heritage. There's even a little bit of salty water in our cockles. We carry a little bit of sweetness. But so for a species like a fish, the difference between hearing and touch is not always that big. I also believe that hearing is the sense of touch. We feel tiny vibrations in the air. It's very sensitive. It's one of our most sensitive organs, and it's also a very direct organ. If I see you sitting there, you are there, you're far away. I just heard him clicking on the computer, and that click is right in my ear. Makes it very intimate. So, the underwater world is really exciting. For a long time, we have done research on basic systems in the 40s and 50s. We've done, when we also started perfecting military submarines, we have done research on the hearing of noise and of sound in the sea and the hearing of sea life. A lot of the time, since the 40s and 50s, the first research was mostly done on sea mammals, cetaceans, dolphins, seals, and stuff like that. And since the last 2 decades, we also start to focus on how other species hear and how they are influenced by the amount of noise we put in the sea. The first results, there's a lot of stuff happening. I'm not a scientist, unfortunately, so I don't understand everything. I definitely don't know everything. But the first results do show that the influence is not good, as we have to. And it's a global problem, because you were talking about the Mariana Trench. We also hear sounds of the humans in the Mariana Trench, which is the deepest part of the ocean, 11 kilometers deep, and in the Antarctic Ocean, very remote places, we hear human sounds. And then it became time for me to listen. And I went out to record on 9 locations. I'll tell you later. It was quite an adventure because, go back to that one before, because I was asked to do this in 2019, so my recordings were in 2020, COVID time. I spent at least as much time as we planned my recording trips as actually more time doing them. I was also going to go along with some scientific trips. All of that got cancelled through COVID, but in the end, we did get out for the sea. And then, and other stuff happened. There's a beautiful law by Steven Spielberg that he invented on the water, namely everything you can do on land that you can do on land that you want to do on water will be 3 times more difficult. If it takes one person 1 hour to do something on land, it costs $100. It will take 3 people 3 hours, it costs $300. This is an unofficial law, and that is my main reference. It's true. Let's see if you but so I started to listen to the North Sea, and I was going to record in 3 places, but in the end I only recorded here down below, from basically Greveling in Holland to Dunkirk. So basically just along the Belgian coast, it's most accessible about this. And that is also the geographical the southern border of the North Sea. And then I went to the waters on Belgium at the top of your map, which is the geographical northern border. And they also sound very different, because here we have the shallow sea, sandy bottom, and Norway is quite deep. It's the deepest part, sometimes up to a kilometer or more, and it's a rocky bottom, and you can actually hear that. If you put a hydrophone, underwater microphone underwater, you hear direct sounds of all the animals or engines that were here around Austen to say something. While in Bergen, every sound has a bit of reverb, has a space, because it bounces against the walls and comes back, and it can travel much further as well. Bernie Krause, who's one of the big acoustic ecologists, defines 3 kinds of sound. On the one hand, you have geophony, which is a sound our planet makes, without animals or plants, without life for us. Then there's the biophony, which is the sound of life, flora and fauna, animals and plants. And then there's the anthropophony, which is a sound stemming from human activity. I started recording, and this is one of the recordings I did in Norway. this is, if I remember correctly, this is at Zeebrugge, the second largest port of our country. And these speakers are quite small, so you don't feel the immense power, and if you would have a huge sub here, you did feel that. This is some pictures of the recording. So this is in Norway at night. This is, I think, Zeebrugge or Dunkirk. Sometimes it's easier to record in the harbors, because a lot of the marine life is near shallow water, is near the coast. This is on the Westerschelde with an assistant. These are two quotes from my diary that I did after I was so on the last day of my recordings, I broke my back. So it was a month I was high on painkillers. It was whatever I had wasn't working on my deadlines. I was also trying to work. And in the meantime, I was trying to think what I had experienced in the thing. And the weird thing for me was I knew before I started recording, because I had a lot of time thanks to COVID, that I would hear a lot of boats. That noise pollution was a serious problem. But it was only then, because a typical recording trip is us going to the sea and sitting there for 8 or 10 hours or longer and listening, not speaking, because of water, the speed of sound is different in water. And so I had assistance also because I also broke my shoulder at the beginning of them. It was a crazy adventure. So I couldn't hold the microphone with 2 hands. It needed to be a bit further apart. So it was usually me and an assistant and a shipper or a boatman listening. And the first time was fine, but when you sit there the whole day, you feel it. You start feeling the noise in your body. And it's the non-relenting thing. It's not the one sound, but the fact that it's always there. It's always there. You always have this acoustic pressure. Sometimes you hear boats from very, very far. I remember we were on a tiny, tiny boat, like only 6 meters long, in front of Dunkirk. And I was hearing this huge boat, which probably just cleared a sandbank or something. And it suddenly sounded very, very close to my hydrophones. And I thought, this is it. This thing sounds like it's almost on top of us. And this sounds like a tanker. He's not even going to see us. He's not even going to feel us. This is it. And then I look up and I don't even see the boat. Because it hit the perfect layer, sound and layers in the water, and it arrived at my hydrophones. And it is this kind of knowledge that I wanted to, because I had all the book knowledge and stuff like that, and the images and the papers that I tried to read and understand. But it was also the effect of being there on the sea and listening. And I do not have visions. That sound still comes through a whole bunch of other times to me. But it did something to me. Also, we had to do some crazy things to record actual natural sound without boats. We went into fjords, with just less boats, but still the same sea life. We went there at night. At one point, we were close to a cliff, and one of the boatsmen, luckily marine soldier, was pushing our boat away from the rocks, and me and my assistant were really trying to listen to the one whoop of, I think it was a cock. Got them. So not everything is as peaceful as this. However, I also heard some beautiful sounds. How the hell do you then work with this? First of all, I have to figure out what this means to me. And I don't tell stories, I ask questions. In my work, I also try to create a work that has the audience fill it in for themselves. Because I think it's more interesting, more touching or relevant. If I can create an experience, an installation that asks you a question, you have to answer the question yourself. I'm actually more interested in your answers than in mine. So there were lots of different designs for CYLAND. The original design also I couldn't do because of COVID. So I started listening and composing. And it's the point where the title became the lateral line. I started working with lines. So I put all my speakers on the line, which is also the horizon, it's also the laterality of the sound in the water. I started working with that. Those are some of the residencies, not interesting. I basically created a counterpoint between anthropophony and biophony. I mixed them both together, played a part, and hoping that you fill in, because the counterpoint is just a frame, and you can decide for yourselves what you think of the balance between the biophony and anthropophony. But then I also know I started with water, and then in the end I noticed the insulation is still missing things. Water, I ended up again with water. For a very long time I didn't want to work with water, and then I went back with water because I also wanted something physical, something visceral. So I went back to the places where I could go, and otherwise I called my assistants and said, "Can you go back to the places and collect some water?" They sent me water, and I put the water in these tubes. So these are all seawater samples of the 9 places I recorded. And literally, sometimes with one thing, I went with a bucket to the beach and got water. I was even a story for my sister finding a bug in the piece at the end of an exhibition after 6 weeks, which had been a larvae when I scooped up the water and then became a thing. But I also needed something special, and this is the key that I needed a key for you to understand the work. And this is the key. It's 3 maps. The 2 smaller maps, the blue and the red one, are noise maps. They show the average background noise level of in the water of the North Sea. The big map is a hand-drawn map from 1796, which is about 20 to 30 years before the first steamboats, before the first big industrial sounds hit the water. This is the noise map of for the natural noise, which is mostly wind and waves. These maps, by the way, have special color coding so that people with daltonism can also read them, because I don't know how many colors a dragonflies can see. But humans, not all of them, I can't see green, for example. But I do see these things. And this is, you can immediately see that you don't even have to read what it is, you can feel the difference in these maps. By the way, these maps are made by Plants. This is an interregional network of all the countries around the North Sea, bordering the North Sea. And it's based, it's started by the EU. And since we're talking about justice, this is the start, the initial start of EU regulation. Because the EU wants to start regulating the amount of noise we can have in our waters. The first thing you need to do before you can regulate that is find out how much there is, how much we make and how much we wouldn't make. So scientists started measuring, and they were so kind of letting me have these maps. And these are some more pictures. And I want to finish with some good news, because there is some good news. Noise pollution, of course, is part of a myriad of pollutions, and every pollution works on the other thing. Climate change is even changing how fast noise, how fast sound goes in the sea, how loud it can be. But of all these different kinds of pollutions, noise pollution is something we can easily mitigate. The first, we would already gain a lot in dB measures if the boats just go slower. If they go slower, they make less noise. There's less ambient noise, and species can hear. We could redesign propellers. We could be more stringent in marine protected areas. We already have some. The research that is done, we already named Yomapan, Saturn, and Soundscape are similar programs working in the Adriatic Sea. There's a lot of research now being done on how to mitigate wind farm construction noise, because this is insanely loud. Of course, we need these wind farms if we want to fight climate change. But we are now also starting to think, how can we make sure that this does not harm the sea life? Yeah, that's my website. I'm not sure if I said about everything, but you might have questions.
Thank you so much. What I spontaneously kept was saying that sound is a sense of touch, and seeing through the dragonfly eyes, right? That's beautiful. Stein, do you have a question to the audience? Because you said you would like to ask questions.
That's a tricky question. I do have questions for the audience. I don't know. Speaking about COVID, did you notice something about the sound in the city during COVID? Can you remember that sound? Can you remember how it sounds? Does anybody have a comment?
Yeah, there was clapping.
Clapping? Something else?
Sirens.
Sirens. Other things? Somebody noticed that you could hear a lot further. I don't live so far from here. It's very noisy. And I could hear 3-4 blocks away, but normally my acoustic horizon is basically 100 meters to the left and to the right of my street. And now you can suddenly hear a door 2 streets down, somebody really angry, slamming a door. I can hear that. I normally can't hear that. There's too much background noise. I'm wondering if you have similar experiences.
I noticed that I was in Berlin at the time, and yeah, it was as if all the low frequency noises were gone because people weren't driving around all the time anymore, and we didn't have these. We also have a couple of streets near where I live in Berlin, and just rumbling noise because for a time I don't know how it was here, but we were not going out, and so we didn't have any of the traffic. And you could hear so much more bird song, and yeah, there was a kind of stillness, right? Yeah.
Anybody share that experience? Maybe not. We all listen. But it's very similar to the experience that I had, and also when I came back. Now, I remember by accident, so this was one of the days that we were, the first time lockdown was kind of ended, and we were allowed to go out. We were allowed to meet people. And by accident, I meet 3 other sound artists in Brussels. We were standing on the corner here in Belgium, and we were talking for 20 minutes. How you been? We're still alive. That's good. And then after, all 3 of us at exactly the same moment, after about 20 minutes, we were like, something is not right. Something is annoying me, and I feel under pressure. And then it took us another 5 minutes, because we were also having the same feeling. It was another 5 minutes. Oh, it's the cars. They are back, and we're standing next to them. And it's not the one car, it is all the cars. And that is similar to what marine life here is. By the way, it's fish and shellfish and whales, they are all completely different. And some of them are very much affected by man-made noise, some of them are less.
Okay, wonderful. I think I want to come back that I guess I feel both of you have a very interesting artist practice grounded in maybe originally a different discipline. Your cosmopolitan experience, I saw on your post last year you were traveling to Indonesia, so different field, different continents as well. And you both bring it into a narrative, in a story, in something physical, right? And it's still grounded. I think the artistic speak is grounded in something. It's not just art for the art. So how would you see that? Because you have now exhibited this artworks, the installations. I think you have some sort of soft power to introduce us into the problematic, to maybe also to convince us, but you also have a mission. So how would you see, both of you, that you want to create a change, knowing that it's not easy, it's maybe toil and struggle or cost energy, but it's also beauty that people get convinced or love your artwork. So how is this between creating art but also having a mission beyond art only?
Interesting. So for me, like I think about this a lot because it's important for me that my works are not didactic. And what I hope to do with them is I acknowledge that I have a mental construct of how I think if I was in charge of everything, how the world might look, you know, or at least the direction that might take. And I acknowledge that, and then in creating the work, I try to put that to one side and to, I mean, all of my work also stems from listening as a practice. That's like very much the starting point of all of my work, and so it's trying to be receptive to what is, particularly in a work like How to Touch a Dragonfly, to be receptive to the world as it is, trying to have a practice of washing away all the values that I might have and that we as humans might have, and then to particularly for How to Touch a Dragonfly, about trying to then create something that elaborates on that allows people different modes of interaction with it that they may not normally have the opportunity to encounter. And I would say that my hope in doing that is that the things that I discover when I'm making the work might be conveyed in a similar way to the people who experience the work, and that it might be some way transportative and allow a different form of touching to the problem space that I'm addressing with the work. Yeah.
Cool.
I hear a lot, which is also about for my work. It starts with listening. It starts with a curiosity. Because again, I have to go back to the beginning, where I'm a social scientist and a journalist, and I like to understand things and figure out how they work and do, and I love to do that through listening. And then it's also I don't. The work is not about me, except for one or two occasions, and then it's more about the effect on me as an example for other things. In figuring out and in being there, some of the knowledge is difficult to transpose. I always think that one of my favorite writers is Jaime Lopez. In his beautiful book Horizon, this is a man who traveled for 70 years. He says, I'm paraphrasing, you need to understand the landscape and to have a relationship with the landscape, which we are part of this one. The landscape is us. Even the Arctic, it's part of our reference, of our stories. So we need the scientific research, but we also need art, because we are not scientific beings, we are semantic beings. We exist through stories. The identity is a story we tell to ourselves. We understand the world by what we tell about the world. And this is in my work. I like to try to do those stories, but I don't use words, I use sounds, because sound is also something, that direct, that physical, that touching. And so you start thinking in another way. And I also learn a lot from my audience, because I recognize the thing of, I don't want any values, because I don't even pose a problem, because I'm not a scientist. propose an experience that that hopefully the audience can take, can enjoy, can hate, whatever, but that they can fill in, because that's what we do anyway. So if you make that an active process, it will create an experience that deals with them more, and maybe they start thinking about things, or not even consciously thinking, but having a slightly widened perspective, knowing that there's something else that they might know, and I definitely don't. And the other thing is also that I'm not an environmental or activist artist. I started because I like listening to places and listening to humans. But every place I wanted to go record, I still want to go record. Be it the little tree in my street, since a few years cricket, which wasn't here 10 years ago. Very loud cricket, and I recognize it from more southern countries. And now it's across my door. Every other biotope I want to go record is under pressure. Above water, below water. The remotest nature till the forest of Brussels. Everything is under pressure, so it's difficult. The moment you start creating a story and seeing what this means and starting to listen to the place, not only actually listening, but also metaphorically listening, it will tell you that things we already know and other people have described more, that our relationship to the world is rapidly changing. The world is also changing, and we are the valuable in there, because this planet will survive us. It's not going to be a problem. And there has been, in the history of our planet, some really great die-outs where 99% of the life has disappeared. And one day we probably will disappear. If we're going like this, it might actually happen very, very soon, and then life will change. However, we have also lost so much. Because remember, the sea is part of us, and we are part of the sea. This planet is part of us, and we are part of the sea. So I don't remember reading this book now, and it says it's also, if we lose these species, these sounds, we also lose a bit of our planet. We lose chances of enriching us, of listening to other new things. And that's, if my work could help fighting that, and creating a perspective where we maybe think on this, it's important. What I also liked and only discovered at the end was that this work, these noise maps, are EU legislation. And we are now, our government is going to change. Because of course we have a personal responsibility for the planet, but in the power of changing, it is not the individual's result. It is not the individual's duty to solve climate crisis. It is the duty of the whole humanity, and the big power players are there on the industry and the government. That was a small digression.
Okay, final question from my side before I would like to hand over. The title is Environmental Justice for Non-Human Species. If you were an advocate, what would be the main line you would think you would like to defend an advocate for? If you talk about environmental justice for non-human species, what would you fight or struggle for?
Depends on to whom I'm advocating. But I think, for a quick answer, it's that we should consider the rights of non-human species and other entities to be as important as the rights that we ascribe to other human beings, whom we should also treat equally when we don't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, similar. Because in the end, I'm not a lawyer or jurist.
Let's draw something up here.
In civil law, basically, is do no harm. Your personal freedom ends when you start harming others. And in that, we should also think not only about other people, but we should think of us as part of a symbiotic network. I mean, you as a person is already a weird thing because you have a lot of bacteria in your gut who also influence how you think and how you feel and shape personality. And the place where you live does the same. And you're part of your landscape. So we need to think how we, not only for the animals and for the landscape itself, but also for us. We shouldn't see such a big division. So we should make sure that our actions do not harm any further the other life that's around us.
I'd go even further and say that our actions really should be fostering lushness for all. Right? Yeah. Let's try and. I was thinking about this a few years ago because I had to start eating fish for my health, and it was a big deal for me. And I was thinking, like for most of my life, I've been trying to really reduce my impact, and now I can't in the way that I'm used to. How do I deal with that? And I realised that we can't sort of disappear into ourselves and have no impact. We have to try to have as positive an impact as possible to outweigh some of the unavoidable impacts that we have by just being alive, breathing out carbon dioxide and so on. Yeah.
I agree.
The audience, what is resonating in you if you really listen to Kat and Stijn about the dragonflies as biosensors and the other sonic world in the North Sea? What would be your takeaway, or how would you be stimulated? If you now left the room, you would be more careful not making too much sound, or maybe would you ask Stijn, would you propose another project for them?
Both works are both really amazing, and it's really nice how they help you become more aware of both situations. And one thing that struck me was the comparison made between us and the sea and the ear. That was really nice, and also really defining the sea as a separate territory, and to see those maps where it became a territory. That was really something that impacted me.
One that I was having in thinking about sound underwater is how much of the relationship that humans and I guess a lot of land animals have to sound creation is based on breath. So there's so that in terms of our biological relationship to sound, I was trying to imagine what my relationship to sound underwater would be, but we don't have the mechanism of the vocal sound, which is what is so kind of primary. This is something that it really made me feel very alien to the underground, to the underwater sound.
You wouldn't make sound for too long. Right? Unless you're a very good swimmer. But it's a beautiful thing because I was very intrigued when you said that dragonflies hear with their wings.
Yeah.
Because not only we hear with our ears and we make sound with our breaths, we also make sound with our ears. Some of those sounds are very, very, very meaningful. The tapping things, or the absence of tapping could also be very meaningful. And in the water, when you swim, you make noise. When you paddle, you make noise. When you come to power plant, you make noise. When you build a wind, you make a lot of noise. And it's also the relationship of sound and that you listen to them communicate is very interesting one. But we do breadth, but the variety, dragonflies do wings, fish have a lateral line, insects do a lot of stridulation here through their exoskeleton. A lot of big species we don't know how they hear, so we can't even imagine what they can hear. We also hear 20 to 20,000 kilohertz, which is a very big range. Fish don't hear very high frequencies. I think insects hear higher frequencies. The range of some cetaceans goes, the whole head of a sperm whale, this huge head, is all echolocation. And there's a beautiful, Michael Stoker has a beautiful chapter in his book where he says, he basically says this is another syntax. This is another kind of sense. It's no longer here, it's something else. And so they exist in that world. So you should think of how you exist in the water, or the same thing here and here. Have you tried making sound in the water?
No, but next time I'm in the water, I'll play with you.
It's also fun to try to listen.
Yeah.
But it's harder to hear with our human ears underwater. From my experience, did you do any experiments when you were preparing the work?
I was sometimes put my head on the water in the beaches. Didn't go diving because I made too much noise and I'm not a really good swimmer or diver. And I was from Berlin also. But you can feel the pressure of a boat if you're in the water. And you can, some people like diving in front of sperm whales because they also feel it in their body. I think they lose a lot of their hearing because things are also crazy now. But yeah, because we don't only hear with our ears, especially with our ears, but we also hear with our body. So it's a very, I like the fact that it's so physical. What I heard was because our ears are built for the air, so there's an impedance mismatch. The vibrations in the water don't reach to our middle ear.
That's it.
No, it's interesting.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I have a bit of a geeky technical question about, because when you showed us the maps, it's over 100 decibels,
Yes.
which is extremely loud for us. I've got two questions. One is, was that part of the composition and are people subject to that in the installation at all, or that variation?
So, very good question. Was there a second one?
There is a second one.
I can first ask this one.
Yeah, and then I'll ask the other one.
No, so first of all, the underwater decibels are, I knew I should have brushed up on my mouth before saying this meeting. Underwater decibels are not the same as decibels in air. A decibel is a logarithmic scale that compares to the minimum the minimum air pressure we can feel here. And that value is different underwater. And also the reference value is no longer on here. It's no longer the reference value. But I forgot where and how the logarithmic scale. This is why it is different. However, for the rest, it's still a logarithmic scale. So if the difference between, it's still a fucking test. So this conversation is, according to this small app I have on my phone, so we're talking here, and so let's say this is 65, 62 dBs. This is a pleasant volume. I know I don't have the best of voices, but nobody's going deaf. The difference of 30 dB, which is about some of the differences that we've seen between natural background noise and human-made background noise. This is background noise. This is this, which is very loud as well. It's not a boat. Driving, boating, riding, whatever. It's 30 dB, which is the difference between this and a quiet rock concert. council that want to protect it.
And the logarithmic scale is a norm. That's the difference so that it's between.
Correct me if I'm wrong. In acoustic things, 3 dB higher is a doubling of the sound pressure. 6 dB means it's 4 times the sound pressure. Psychoacoustically for us, not for other species, we don't know. Psychoacoustically, you will hear a sound twice as loud if it's 10 dB loud.
Yeah, and there are regulatory limits on decibels in sort of public spaces, right, which is a maximum of 80, I think, for like, yeah.
I thought it was 90, but it also depends on the time, the place. So, I think
rock concerts are exempt.
I think, yeah, but then you have to have special permit and then you can have like earplugs. The moment it's like above 90, and if you want to go over 100, you need to have special permits.
And all this regulation is going to hit the North Sea at some point, right? This kind of regulation.
Hopefully, the North Sea. And probably this is EU law, and because like when I showed the installation last year, the installation was also shown at Split in Hungary, at the Adriatic coast, and so I wanted to have noise maps also of the Adriatic coast, because for me the North Sea is a patch pro toto, because it's the Lion Sea. I think we're winning by not even a decibel from the Adriatic Sea, and it's not a price you want to win. So it's going to be for the whole European part of the sea, and hopefully, if new industries have to be invented and ships need to be built differently, it might also help outside the EU.
My other question is do we know at all how, basically what the effect is of that kind of level of noise on creatures underwater?
This is something my work, I read about it, but because I was first trying to understand, so I'm not a specialist in that. We do know there is an effect. And there's an effect physiologically, so they build, behaviorally, they migrate, some species, till even effects in the DNA. So, I don't know how you call it, but yeah, so it's something that is given down the species. Or it can lead to more cancers. And it's very different because the variety of how species underwater here is enormous. So some species are impacted more than others, and some species are impacted in very different ways. Mollusk might not be affected by the building of a wind farm, but the larvae of the mollusk could be. So in the same thing. So the best example we know is, this is the thing we know the most, is that in whales, it becomes more difficult for them to find their pods. They start, similar to birds, and also in fish, they start to sing in different pitches, sing louder. I'm not sure if this in fish or whales it's the same, but in birds also, the melodies are not that rich anymore in the city, because you just scream at the top of your lungs and hear. That's it. I don't know the extent. There's a lot, and a lot will become clear, but this is one of the blind spots. There is a story, of course, below this way.
The lonely swell.
Whale.
What's the story of the lonely swell?
It's a whale that, if I remember so well, they think this happened either by an accident or by ear damage. It started to sing not at the normal pitch of his group or species. So no other group, no other pod recognize this way. It's like you would be talking in a pitch that I don't recognize as a human voice. And then I can't recognize you. And I don't see you, none of you. You're very far away. So it's where it's called, and nobody's calling back. And this, they think this, they never found a trail, but they did stipulate, hypothesize that it could be because the only hearing was broken. And we know that a lot of whales have damaged hearing. The biggest result is, of course, the acoustic horizon gets smaller of the species. They can hear less far. So they can communicate less far. They live in this, if you depend on sound to find your food, and you live in the sonic haze, that's going to be a problem.
And they hear less far because the sound doesn't come through. It's not because of their ears working differently or other.
It's pretty because of that, but it's also, there's a thing called.
Because the sound doesn't come through.
Yeah.
Because
it's masked. There's a thing that's, we also know that it's masking. I think it's, let's say for sea mammals, it's going to be very similar to our hearing. It is, if there's a louder sound, you will not notice the quieter sound next to it, because it will be masked by the louder sound. And maybe if you produce a sound and you still hear it, the fish that are further, the whales that are further, won't hear you call because they will hear us.
I have a question for Kat.
Sure.
The structure of your work is just so phenomenal, and it's really nice as well that you thought about how it can be that it's deconstructed and reconstructed each time. I had a question about the structure. So each of the star shapes are aluminium, but there's a larger structure which holds that in place, and I wondered what that was made out of, and also how you came up with this, how you generated the globe and knew about the hexagons and the pentagons. That seems incredibly, that's just, I don't know, it's a bit fancy.
So the external structure is plywood, that's CNC plywood. We wanted it to be bamboo. We also wanted not to have the aluminium, but to rather have bamboo, but it was not possible to control it enough for it to be a stable structure. And we also quite wanted it not to fall on people's heads. So this was the final choice. And it was, the plywood structure is really there for kind of for safety, to ensure that everything stays in one place if it's up for a very long time. Because the way that the aluminium works is as soon as you put the final screw in place, it's completely solid and it holds itself entirely, but until that point, it's really floppy. And you have to kind of, really get everything finely tuned, put the final one in place, and you suddenly have this completely solid ball, which is super heavy. And that's because it's so very exact with all of the dimensions. And the way that we did that was I worked with an incredible designer, Swedish designer based in Shanghai called Robin Anderson, and he modelled it using Rhino and Grasshopper, which are architectural modelling software. And we went through a process of iterations working out how many LEDs we needed in order to create the effect that I wanted, and then how we could create a section and what the dimensions would be to fit it, and then exactly like the model told us in the end how it would all fit together, and we had to decide where to cut it, how we could create the shape of the doorway, which is reinforced, the door is reinforced for strength. Yeah, and then it was a matter of a lot of maps, essentially, to make it all come together in the right place. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah, very basic question also for Kat. How do they do it actually that they know how dragonflies see?
Clairvoyance. Yeah, I don't know. I presume it's to do with understanding how the signals go from the lens to the eye, and then like creating recreations of that.
But then, yeah, probably. Then I wondered though, but like, how can we? It's all in the end still our human projection that we think how they might perceive it, right? Because as you were also saying, I don't even know how you see the world. I just know how I see it, and I will never know how it is to see through your eyes. And it must be so much, like the step to go so far to see through a dragonfly's eye. Yeah, in the end, it is still than just
Yeah, and there's
the attempt to
No, totally, and we're absolutely limited by our own physiology as well as our individual subjectivity, right? And so that's also why I said, like, at the moment, this is how they think it works.
Okay.
And on top of that, for how to touch a dragonfly, we're also layering in the understanding of how, as a human, we're encountering that representation of it too, right? So it's taking that cognitive understanding of what we think is the subjectivity of a non-human species, and then putting ourselves into an environment that essentially forms a translation for a human body into that subjectivity. And so, I have to make a lot of choices to try and create that feeling. And one of the things about that is also to think about, the meaning and the concepts and the learnings that I got from the research, and reflecting all of that knowledge as well as what I understand of dragonfly perception into creating an environment that has a particular effect on the human body. And that's one of the reasons that the paper was chosen for the interior, is to create this, also to create a space into which you're stepping and able to leave your own perception at the door. And the materiality of the paper creates a very special feeling inside the space for the body, and also acoustically, as well as like augmenting the colours in particular ways, right? So it's all highly subjective and can't at all be spoken of as real representation, but that's,
No, but at least it does this step, as you were saying, also with the empathy, right? It's like this big step to try, at least. It's the same as I said, I will not know how it is how to see the world. Of course, I'm trying to, I'm empathizing with you, and I'm trying to get on a level here for you. So it's more about that also there as well. I understand. I was just, I just always think it's so fascinating, this question of perception. It's so highly individual, and you cannot.
And I mean, it's exactly this point where the aim of this work and other of our work is to try to engender an empathic feeling towards something that it's somehow more difficult to empathise with because it's so other. I did it also with corals, and I did it with the Arctic ecosystem too. Corals respond to sound pollution by creating more mucus, which mucus, like phlegm, kind of like slime, yeah. But yeah, the aim then is not to represent how the other creature or other ecosystem sees the world, but rather to create a dialogue that we can participate in. Yeah.
I think you're both very powerful in being a mediator, both that we get to know the other, both in perception. I think also your work is creating empathy. At the same time, like we're saying, there need to be some translation. Because first of all, you are not those species, but then still you also translate it for us, which is wonderful. And of course, because you do research, you try to make this translation being rounded and bring it to us. Is there any final question? I know the laser talks tend to be longer in Brussels because there's interesting discussion. So if we have room for, I think, a final question. If this is not the case. Thank you so much, Kat and Stijn. It was a pleasure. I know you both for several years, but it's a new occasion to get to know you and your works. Thank you so much. Thanks to the audience, to Laser Talk, CYLAND, the people who are watching us online, and I think we are communicating the next Laser Talk potentially after summer break, maybe in a different location, and so please stay connected. Thank you very much.
Thank you.